Hello, everybody. This week, I want to talk about what's called economic nexus. If you are in retail sales and you're an online seller, if you sell through Amazon, Etsy, eBay, Walmart, or you have your own website and use something like Shopify, you've probably have dealt with, asked the question, or heard about sales tax. Um, And just for some quick history on this, so it used to be called a physical presence test. And I think it was 2017. Well, let me define physical presence. So, physical presence is basically you have a physical presence within a state, and so the state has the ability to tax you. Either you have employees there, you have inventory there, you own property there, you have some sort of physical thing within the state boundaries. And then you owe sales tax in that state if you have sales in that state. Um, Physical presence is a great way to explain what Nexus means, because ultimately, Nexus is the ability for a government to put you in jail or seize your property for failure to file or pay taxes. So if you had inventory within a state boundaries and you failed to collect and remit sales tax and ultimately push comes to shove and everything, worst case scenario, they could walk into your warehouse and seize your inventory. So that's kind of where the physical presence nexus came from, was there was some they had the ability to come in and seize your property. Versus, like if you're in Texas and selling in Oklahoma can't necessarily go into Texas to seize your property. Um, so then we had in 2017, basically South Dakota changed their state laws to include cells. Basically to say, well, if you have cells within our state, then we're going to make you pay sales tax. And they call it economic nexus. And what Wayfair, a large online seller, said, no, we don't care. We're not collecting and remitting sales tax for South Dakota. Uh, Ultimately, lawsuits were filed. It ends up in the Supreme Court, and South Dakota won. And so when South Dakota won, it established economic nexus as a national standard. So the baseline is $100,000 in sales or 200 transactions within our state. You can either have that as your basic rule or you can increase the limits, but you can't go below the limits or else you'd end up back in the Supreme Court. So all the states have basically adopted economic nexus now. California and Texas made it 500,000 instead of 100,000. Um, then that kind of shook up the whole world, and you ended up with now marketplace facilitator laws. So this is where we are currently today, that if you sell on a marketplace like Amazon, Etsy, eBay, Walmart, those marketplaces collect and remit your sales tax on your behalf. This is to minimize the administrative burden on smaller businesses. That way you're not being forced to collect and file in 50 different states because you have online sales. Well, not quite 50 states. There's a few states that are exempt. But anyway, that's besides the point. So we ended up with this thing called economic nexus. It grew into marketplace facilitator law. And ultimately, now if you um, have an online business, you really only have to worry about economic nexus if you're selling within your own website using something like Shopify. Shopify has some great built-in tools to calculate your sales tax for you. Um, and it monitors all the states and all your sales and all, where stuff is shipped to and where sales come from. And you can pull your report and see if you have $100,000 in sales. Now, so that was some brief history of where economic nexus came from. Basically, economic nexus means you have sales within our jurisdiction, and we want you to collect and remit tax on that. Well, now that we have economic nexus for sales tax, there has been created a multi-state board that wants to also move economic nexus into income taxes. And so now this is becoming an issue for service-based companies instead of just retail-based companies. So this could be, it's kind of in its infancy. It's been started, it's maybe been going, this board's been created for probably about a couple of years now. And they're working on exactly what it is. It's kind of a volunteer thing for each state to join right now. That hasn't gone to the Supreme Court. It hasn't been challenged, and it isn't a national law yet or a national precedent set by a court ruling yet. This is purely some states coming together and saying, hey, we like economic nexus because we like to make money. So let's now create economic nexus for income taxes. For most small businesses, this really doesn't mean a whole lot. But for larger businesses, it could really become pretty material. So, again, income taxes used to fall underneath the physical presence test, meaning you have uh, inventory, people, or real estate within a state boundaries. If you have one of those three things, then there is a calculation that goes into multi-state income taxes. Ultimately, multi-state income taxes, like if you, let's say you made $100,000 in taxable income, you're going to pay federal taxes, your 100% of your federal taxes to the IRS. Well, with the way multi-state rules work, they're all different within each state. They use typically three different percentages. All three get calculated and have different weights in every state. Basically, it's based on sales, it's based on employees and property, and all. You're weighing your physical presence within the state. Um, and because of these different allocations in whatever state you're selling in, ultimately you can end up paying tax on like 110% of your income through multi-state tax rules. So multi-state can kind of hurt you. Now, luckily, state tax income taxes are usually all significantly less than federal. But if you're paying federal taxes on $100,000, you might be paying a state income tax on $110,000. So that's just something to keep in mind, the way you kind of get hurt in multi-state taxes. Well, now this board, the MTC, Multi-State Tax Commission, is now saying, well, we're adding a rule. So instead of just having physical presence, now if you have cells within the state jurisdiction, you owe income taxes within that state as well. But again, every state that is participating in this board is allowed to set their own rules. This is just kind of an oversight board to help states work together. We had something similar to this in sales tax before economic nexus became a play, and now we're having it in income taxes. So I'm just going to quickly share screen. Um, I uh, I just Googled the MTC to show it. And so this is just the summary that Google's AI pulled up. But basically, you still have property, people, payroll, sales, or now sales is what they've added. So it's $500,000. So the inventory, property, real estate, and payroll, people, that hasn't really changed. Um, I mean, before it was really if you had $1 of value in those states, it counted, but now they've actually set it to 50,000. But sales is 500,000. So, if you're in Texas and you're selling in Oklahoma and you're selling website design or you're selling accounting services or you're selling whatever that not subject to sales tax, you still might owe income taxes in Oklahoma if you have over $500,000 of sales. So this is something that people or businesses now need to recognize, is that as you grow, you need to monitor, even if you don't have property, plant, equipment, people, inventory within estate boundaries, you might still meet income tax nexus because you have sales over 500,000 in any given state. So just keep that in mind as you grow. Hopefully, this isn't really that big of a deal for a lot of businesses. This is mostly like if you have $500,000 in sales in any given other state than your home state, then you're probably, several million dollars worth of sales within your home state. That would be kind of the idea of this. At that level, you should be able to afford the administrative burden of this, but that's not always the case. So just keep that in mind. If you have $500,000 of sales, you now, within any given state, you now are required to file income taxes in those states per economic nexus for income taxes. Just an FYI for everybody. Hope this is useful information. Until next week, have a great, profitable week and a wonderful weekend.